The carnival closed at midnight. I was still inside at 12:47. I didn't plan it that way. I just fell asleep behind the generator shed after working a double shift running the tilt-a-whirl. When I woke up, the lights were off, the music was gone, and the whole fairground was wrapped in a silence so thick it felt like something pressing against my ears. My name is Derek Paulson. I was 19 years old that summer, working seasonal rides for Harmon's Traveling Carnival in rural Georgia. It wasn't a glamorous job. 12-hour days, bad food, and bunk beds in a trailer that smelled like diesel and mildew. But the money was decent, and I had nowhere else to be. That summer changed that. That summer I stopped wanting to be anywhere near a carnival ever again. I sat up slowly behind the shed, my neck stiff from sleeping against the metal siding. The fairground stretched out in front of me, maybe 8 acres of dark shapes. Ride skeletons stood still against the sky. The Ferris wheel was a black circle above everything, not moving, just there. The strings of unlit bulbs that had blazed orange and red all evening now hung like dead vines between the poles. I reached for my phone. Dead. I hadn't charged it since morning. I wasn't scared yet. I knew the layout of this place. I'd walked it every day for 3 weeks. I figured I'd just cut across the Midway, find the staff trailers at the south end, and knock on somebody's door. Easy enough. I started walking. The Midway was a long stretch of game booths on both sides. Ring toss, balloon darts, the milk bottle throw. During the day, these booths were loud and bright, run by guys who shouted at every person who walked by. Now they were just dark wooden frames full of stuffed animals hanging from hooks. Bears, clowns, oversized cartoon characters. Their glass eyes caught what little moonlight came through the clouds. Every one of them seemed to be facing me. I kept my eyes forward and walked faster. I was maybe halfway down the Midway when I heard it. A sound, low and slow, like the creak of wood under someone's weight. I stopped. The sound stopped. I stood still for a moment, listening. Nothing. Just wind, maybe. Old booths settling. I told myself that and started walking again. The creak came back, same pace as my footsteps, one creak for every step I took. I stopped again. Silence again. My heart was moving faster now. I turned around slowly and looked back down the way I came. The Midway behind me was empty, just the hanging animals in the booths, swaying slightly in the breeze. But one of the booths, the balloon dart booth, 3 stalls back, had its curtain pulled to one side. I was almost certain it had been closed when I passed it. I stared at it for a long time. Nothing moved, no sound. I turned back around and walked, faster now. I wasn't running because some part of my brain was insisting there was nothing to run from. Then I heard breathing, not my own, something behind me and to my left, a slow, steady, almost calm breathing, the kind a person makes when they're not trying to be quiet because they don't think they need to be. I broke into a run. I didn't look back. I ran down the rest of the Midway, past the food stalls, past the ticket booths, toward the south end of the grounds where the trailers were parked in a cluster. I could see the faint glow of a trailer window ahead. Someone was awake. I ran toward that light like it was the only real thing left in the world. I hit the door with both hands and started knocking, hard, frantic. The door opened. It was Carl, one of the older ride mechanics. He looked at me like I was out of my mind. "What in the hell?" "Someone's in the Midway," I said. I was breathing hard. Someone was following me. Carl looked past me into the dark. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then he said, "Come inside." He poured me a cup of water and sat across from me at his small table. He had a look on his face I couldn't read. "You hear breathing?" I nodded. He rubbed the back of his neck. "This your first time closing here?" "Yeah." He nodded slowly. 3 years ago, before you started with Harmon's, a man was killed in that Midway overnight, security guard. They never figured out who did it, never found anyone. No evidence, no witnesses. He paused. But workers been hearing things in that Midway at night ever since. I stared at him. You knew about this and nobody said anything? Carl looked at his coffee cup. We don't talk about it. Bad for business. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in my bunk staring at the ceiling of the trailer, listening to the distant creaking sounds from the direction of the Midway. They came every hour, steady, rhythmic, like footsteps pacing. I quit the next morning, drove 3 hours home without stopping. 6 months later, I looked up the story Carl had told me, found a local newspaper article from 2019. Security guard named Thomas Rell, 44 years old, found in the Midway of Harmon's traveling carnival at 6 a.m. by a ride operator. Cause of death was listed as blunt force trauma. The article said he was found at the balloon dart booth. His eyes were open, and he was facing down the Midway, like he'd been watching something walk away.
I went in alone. That was my first mistake. The sign above the entrance said Hall of Mirrors in red letters that had started to peel at the edges. It was the last attraction at the far end of the fairgrounds, set apart from the other rides and games by a gap of maybe 50 feet. No other booths nearby, no foot traffic, the kind of spot most people never bother walking all the way to. I was 23, visiting the county fair alone on a Thursday night in October. Most of my friends had skipped it. Too cold, they said, too late in the season. But I'd always liked carnivals, something about the noise and the light. It made me feel less alone, which probably sounds sad, but it's the truth. I paid the $2 to an old woman sitting in a lawn chair by the entrance. She didn't look up when she took my money, didn't say anything, just waved one thin hand toward the opening in the canvas. Inside, it was cold, colder than outside, which didn't make sense for a tent. The mirrors were arranged in a maze pattern, narrow corridors that turned and doubled back. The lighting was dim yellow, coming from bare bulbs strung overhead. My reflections moved with me on all sides, dozens of versions of me, shrinking into the distance. I started walking. The first few minutes were normal. I made wrong turns, dead ends, retraced my steps. I could hear the fair outside, the distant music and crowd noise muffled through the canvas walls. I wasn't scared, just focused on finding the way through. Then, I noticed something wrong with one of my reflections. I had stopped at a T-junction to decide which way to go, and I glanced at the mirror directly in front of me. My reflection was there, hands at my sides, looking back at me, but it blinked 2 seconds after I did. I stood very still. I blinked again, deliberately, watching the mirror. The reflection blinked, but later, just a fraction of a second after I did. Mirrors don't do that. A reflection is instant. It moves when you move, exactly when you move. I told myself it was the lighting, a flicker in the bulb above me creating a visual stutter. I turned left and kept walking. The corridor I entered was longer than the others, straight, maybe 30 feet, with mirrors on both sides creating infinite copies of me receding left and right. I walked to the end, turned and found another dead end. I turned back. There was a figure standing at the far end of the corridor. Tall, dressed in something dark, too far away and too dimly lit to make out clearly. At first, I thought it was another visitor who had entered behind me. I started walking toward it. It didn't move. I slowed down. The figure was just standing there, facing me. I couldn't see a face. The lighting was worse at that end, the bulb above it either dim or dead. Hello? My voice came out smaller than I meant it to. Nothing. No response. No movement. I stopped, about 15 feet away, close enough now to see that the figure was not reflected in the mirrors on either side of the corridor. I was reflected. I could see myself, pale and tense in both mirrors flanking me. But where the figure stood, there was nothing in the mirrors, just an empty corridor. My whole body went cold. I took one step backward, then another. I kept my eyes on the figure as I backed away. It stayed still. It didn't follow. It just stood there in the dark end of that corridor and watched me. I turned a corner and started moving fast, not quite running, navigating the maze without thinking, just turning wherever the path opened. I wasn't breathing right. The tent felt smaller. The mirrors showed me my own terrified face over and over from every angle, and I stopped looking at them because I was afraid of what else I might see in them. I found the exit, a gap in the canvas with a cold breeze coming through it. I pushed through it, and I was outside, in the October air, under the open sky. I stood there for a full minute, just breathing. I went back to the entrance where the old woman had been sitting. The lawn chair was empty. I asked around. I talked to 2 different game booth workers nearby. I described the old woman, gray hair, red cardigan, lawn chair by the mirror tent entrance. The first worker shrugged and said he'd never noticed anyone work in that tent. The second worker, a man in his 50s, looked at me for a moment before he answered. That tent's been closed for 2 years. Wiring went bad. They never fixed it. It's been locked up since last season. I looked back toward the far end of the fairgrounds, the gap of empty space, the tent, dark and still. The sign above the entrance, Hall of Mirrors, was still lit. Dim yellow light, barely working, but on. And standing just inside the entrance, half visible through the canvas opening, was a tall, dark shape, still watching. I left the fair and drove home, and I did not look in my rearview mirror the entire way. I'm still not sure what I'm afraid I might have seen in it.
He was at every carnival I worked. That's what makes it hard to explain. My name is Sarah Voss. For 4 summers during college, I worked various traveling carnivals up and down the East Coast, different companies, different routes, different towns. I worked games, I worked food stalls, I worked ticketing. It was hard work and I loved it in a strange way. The constant movement, the new towns every week, the feeling of being part of something that appeared out of nowhere and vanished just as fast. The man first appeared during my second summer at a fairground in western Pennsylvania. I was running a ring toss booth when I saw him standing at the edge of the Midway, just standing there, not playing anything, not walking toward anything, just watching. He was tall, wore a dark jacket, and had a pale face that was hard to look at directly, the way a bright light is hard to look at, not because it's bright, but because something about it makes your eyes want to move away. I couldn't tell you what his features looked like. I never could. Every time I looked at him directly, I found my eyes sliding off his face, landing somewhere else. That first time, I watched him for a few minutes from my booth. He never moved. He was just a still point in the moving crowd. After a while, I got busy with customers, and when I looked up again, he was gone. I didn't think about it much afterward. The second time was 3 weeks later, different fairground, small town in Maryland. I was on a break, sitting on the back steps of a food trailer eating a sandwich. The grounds were loud and bright, and there he was, standing between 2 game booths across the Midway. Same jacket, same stillness, same pale face pointed in my direction. I felt it this time, a deep, low discomfort, like the feeling before a storm, pressure without sound. I went back inside the trailer. When I looked out the small window above the counter, he was gone. I told myself it was a coincidence. Different man, same type. People wear dark jackets. Pale faces are not rare. By the 4th sighting, I stopped telling myself that. He appeared twice more that summer in different states, always at the edge of a crowd, always still, always with that pale, unreadable face aimed in my direction. The 5th time I saw him, I decided to walk toward him. I wanted to see his face up close. I wanted to prove to myself he was just a person. I crossed the Midway toward him. He was standing maybe 40 feet away near the entrance to the funhouse. The crowd was thin in that area, just a few people drifting past. I kept my eyes on him as I walked. At about 20 feet away, a group of teenagers moved between us, laughing loud, taking up the whole path. I stepped to the side and waited for them to pass. They were past me in maybe 4 seconds. He was gone. 40 feet of open ground in 4 seconds. No direction he could have gone quickly without me seeing him move. I stopped walking. My sandwich was still in my hand. I stood in the middle of the Midway and I turned in every direction, scanning the crowd. He was behind me, close, maybe 10 feet. I don't know how I knew before I turned, but I knew. The pressure was back, heavier now, almost physical. I turned slowly. He was standing there, watching me with that pale, directionless face. This close, I should have been able to see his eyes, his nose, the lines of his expression. But looking at his face was like looking at a word you've read so many times it stops looking like a word. The features were there, but they wouldn't resolve into anything I could hold in my mind. He did not speak. He did not move. I walked away. I didn't run. Something told me not to run. The same instinct that tells you not to run from a dog that's watching you. I walked back to my booth with my heart slamming, and I did not look back. That was the last summer I worked carnivals. But here is the part that I have never been able to explain. Not to myself, not to anyone. 2 years after I stopped, I was going through old photos on my laptop. Summer fair photos, just background shots I'd taken on slow nights. Midway lights, crowd shots, ride photos. I found one I didn't remember taking. A photo of the Midway in Maryland, the second time I saw him. You could see me in the photo, sitting on the trailer steps across the way, eating my sandwich. I didn't take the photo, I was in it. I looked at the metadata. The photo was taken from the position of where he had been standing. And in the background of the photo, barely visible past the crowd, in the shadow between two booths, there was a second figure. Same height, same jacket, same stillness. Looking at the first man, like he was being watched too. Like whatever he wasn't alone, and neither was I.